Hey, everybody, this is the DLLS Dallas Stars podcast, and we're talking a special segment today about the Hockey Hall of Fame, because now that the 2024 class has been inducted officially with that ceremony earlier this week, it's time to look at 2025. Alongside Craig Ludwig and Sam Nessler, I'm Owen Newkirk. Thanks for joining us. The thing about 2025 is there are some new names that seem to be no-brainer first ballot Hall of Famers, to the point that a lot of big name guys aren't going to get in this coming 2025 draft class because there isn't space.
No space. They're only taking 4. And when you bring up Big Z, Zdeno Chara, man, he tap danced right in there. Joe Thornton, Duncankeith. I mean, they're just who's the last one?
Careyprice.
Oh, yeah, he's pretty good. He's a pretty good goaltender. Montreal could use him right now.
Yeah,
the door is closed. Those guys they're in. They could induct them this year if they let's cut off the next group and get going. But they check off all the boxes. We threw some names out there earlier before we did all this thing, and there's boxes that have to be checked in order for these guys to be entertained, to be in that special group, and these guys check them all.
So let's start with Big Z, Zdeno Chara. I mean, I still can't believe that the Islanders and the Senators didn't know what they had, or maybe it was just that he had to develop in his career in that amount of time.
I believe that.
And went to Boston, everybody went, how did those two teams not be patient enough to keep him around? Because he became look, he was a 6'9" monster of a human being. He's a huge fitness guy, but he also led the culture with help from Patrice Bergeron, Shirley in Boston. But Chara was a driver. He was an incredible player on the ice. And the thing I always liked was, I remember he did an interview where somebody was asking him about hazing or initiation and, giving rookies a hard time because they've got to pay their dues. And that's what they did. And he goes, no, we don't do that in Boston. Why? Because our job as a team is to win games, and everybody that's on our roster has to feel comfortable to be here and want to be part of this team. And that's a leader for me.
Well, you can go back in the day, and one of the guys that I unfortunately had to play against was Terry O'Reilly, but Chara just fits the logo. I mean, I said, he checks the boxes for the Hall of Fame, and he checks every box for the Boston Bruins. And you mentioned his size and his strength and what he could do on the blue line, but I think his leadership was probably even a notch above everything that his physical talent and skills were.
And he won.
Duncan Keith, he won. Same thing, right? 3 Stanley Cups with the Blackhawks. It seems like if you're going with that kind of hardware, he was a Conn Smythe winner in 2015. He won the Norris. He won gold with Canada at the Olympics. He was one of the 100 greatest NHL players when they voted that in 2017. Seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah. I mean, he was if you said Chicago Blackhawks during that, as long as that was when they had that dynasty that they had, it was the Keith, the Seabrook, the Kane, and the Taves, right? And that was because of the impact they had for so many years. And he was one of those guys that we talked about, kind of like Ryan Suter before this past couple of years, where he just didn't seem to age. He just played crazy number of minutes. They were good, they were bad, didn't matter. He played a ton of minutes, and he won. And that's one of those guys. It's kind of rare when you look that won at every level, won everywhere. And those are the kind of Sidney Crosbys and those guys that are just automatics.
I see him skating, and I mean, he could, in today's game. We were talking about Ryan Suter earlier and about the minutes that he could play. I think Duncan, in a playoff game, played over 60 minutes one game. I think he just, again, a gamer, big time player. Wouldn't it be nice to be able to take Duncan Keith and Patrick Kane, Jonathan Toews, and have them all go in together? That I think would have one class where they're all from the same team to be able to go in. I don't think that's the way they're going to do it.
It probably won't.
Yeah, but those guys are going in too, I would think. But anyway, I think he was the guy that he was. And it's hard to say that he was the heartbeat of that team, but he was part of it because Jonathan Toews probably was. But I just think that the best way that I can sum him up is he was a big game player. When everything was on the line is when he played his best.
Let's talk about Le Habitant's Carey Price. I mean, he was the gold standard when he was playing. I know he hasn't played for a couple years now, which is why, even though I don't think he's officially retired, but he's been out of the game long enough, he was the guy. Anybody said, best goalie in the world, there was really no argument when he was at the peak of his game.
Yeah, and he played on some teams that weren't great, and he had to be better than he probably needed to be.
I was looking at his stats this morning. His stuff blows me away. I mean, he's won the Masterton Trophy, Hart Trophy, Ted Lindsay, Vezina, William Jennings. He's won a ton of things. But if you look at his stats, we know how he was in his prime, right? He was incredible. His numbers were great. He had a couple of seasons in a row where he was over 930 save percentages. But then I remembered he took the Canadiens to the Stanley Cup final just in that 2021 shortened season. That's only a few years ago, and that was well beyond his prime when many people thought that he was done and that team was done, and he brought them to almost a miracle Stanley Cup championship during a very hard season, and he was very good during that run. So
the only downside of that is injuries actually ended his playing career. Yep. Otherwise, who knows if he'd still be playing. But the goalies are happy too. And nowadays, I mean, he set the bar. I think he was the first goaltender to get $10.5 million a year. So I know that there's a guy in New York Rangers. He's using that for a benchmark. So he did some other things from the standpoint of salary wise.
And while Price didn't win a Stanley Cup, he did win a gold medal in Sochi with Canada, the 2016 World Cup of Hockey, and a World Junior Gold in 2007. So that's plenty of hockey hardware. Which, remember, Hockey Hall of Fame, it's not NHL Hall of Fame. And then the fourth one is Joe Thornton, who, I mean, was just a picture of longevity and one of the top players. I always wonder with Boston, because he was their first overall pick with the Bruins, if that was we talked about Connor Bedard recently, of not being thrust into the captaincy in Chicago at too young of an age. And it felt like Boston made Joe Thornton the captain too fast.
I feel the same way. And I think that some of these kids, they need to grow into it. And you would think in a market, in an organization like the Bruins, with all the captains, that they've had there, that they would have not did that. So, but yeah, I mean, to me, the word that you took it, what I was going to say is longevity. I mean, to be able to play 20 plus years and to be the size that he is. And you know what? Maybe it was good for him to get out of that market.
I think it was.
I think it was. Maybe, again, some of this is about personalities. Some guys just aren't wired to be in that kind of a market.
Or maybe just be in that market and not be the captain.
Yeah.
That's one I always wondered about as a young Bruins fan back in the day, of just maybe he would have been fine being one of the best players on the team, but not wearing the C.
And we should ask our producer.
Well, he would be very fired up to talk about it. But hey, he won gold at the Olympics in 2010, World Cup of Hockey twice in 2004 and 2016, and the World Juniors in 1997. So while he didn't win a Stanley Cup, boy, he came up with a lot of hardware. He also won the Art Ross and the Hart Trophy the same year. And then you look at guys that are outside of this, because those are our top four. Ryan Getzlaf won gold twice in the Olympics, World Cup of Hockey, and the World Juniors. 17-year career with the Ducks.
Didn't he win a cup too?
And he led them to the Stanley Cup in 2007. Mm-hmm. And he might be the fifth guy on that list. Does he have to wait a year because there's not spots?
He'll be in next.
You can look at, unless, correct me if I'm wrong, that's a different tier than what we just talked about.
For sure.
Right? So that's why it's such a lock, because it's not just that there's so many good names. It's those four are a step above the remaining.
And we were getting ready to do the segment. We just looked at this list that was on the NHL website of players that aren't in. And boy, there's a ton of marquee guys. Patrick Marleau, for example, all-time NHL games played, leader in games played with 1779, right? Ryan Miller, one of the best American goalies, and maybe could have won gold, but they got silver in that great gold medal game in Vancouver back in 2010. Alexander McGillney, an incredible player. He won gold for the Soviet Union in 1988, won the Cup with the Devils against the Stars in 2000. Keith Tkachuk, Henrik Zetterberg, all these guys. I mean, I could keep going down the list, but it's just high, stiff competition right now.
Well, of that group that you mentioned, Zetterberg and McGillney. It's been a puzzler for a few years now. Why they're not throwing him in there? But I mean, Zetterberg's won a couple cups, and what he's done, his numbers and everything else. The other ones, when it comes to because major awards are part of it, the Stanley Cup and, whether you're winning a scoring title or an MVP or, one of those kind of awards, that comes into play. And obviously what you do, because again, this isn't an NHL thing. This is a hockey thing, and so what you do over in Europe matters too. So, but those are the two that to me, I think with, I think they're going to be in. McGillney, I don't get. It's just been years, and I have no idea. Somebody's got something going on there.
Agree.
All right.
A lot of good names in there.
Something to look forward to, because now that the 2024 class has been officially inducted, and congratulations once again to Shea Weber, Jeremy Roenick, Pavel Datsuk, Natalie Darwitz, Chrissy Wendell-Poe, Colin Campbell, and David Poyle on Monday's gala ceremony in Toronto. It's time to think about next year's class. What do you think? Let us know.